The incense still lingered in the air. And then, silence. The moment Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle stepped onto the marble floor of St. Peter's Basilica, the world seemed to hold its breath. Cameras clicked, but the flashbulbs couldn't pierce the weight of what was about to be revealed. This wasn't just another Vatican announcement. This was something sacred, something personal. And Cardinal Tagle, usually composed, warm, and eloquent, stood trembling, his eyes rimmed with tears. Pope Francis had died on April 21st, 2025. At 88, the beloved pontiff left behind more than a legacy. He left behind a mystery, and today, it was about to be unraveled. A week earlier, only the highest members of the College of Cardinals had been summoned to a private chamber deep within the Apostolic Palace. There, sealed in a humble envelope marked simply Voluntatem Ultimum Papae Francisci, lay the final written words of the Pope. It was hand-delivered to them by his most trusted confidant, Sister Helena Maria, a cloistered nun who hadn't left the convent walls in nearly 2 decades. "He wrote it 3 days before he died," she said softly. "He said it came to him in a dream, or perhaps from beyond a dream." No one knew then what those words contained. Not even Cardinal Tagle, one of Francis's closest spiritual sons. Until now. Standing at the altar, Tagle's voice cracked as he read aloud. "To my beloved brothers and sisters in Christ, in my final hours, I prayed not for myself, but for the future of the Church. I saw a time of division, of noise, of empty proclamations. But then, I saw a light. It was not in Rome. It was not in the palaces or the councils. It was in the faces of the poor, the rejected, the quiet faithful. I ask, no, I plead, that the Church return to the peripheries. Let the next shepherd be one who smells of sheep, whose hands are calloused by mercy, and whose heart beats not for power, but for people." Tagle paused. He tried to continue, but emotion overwhelmed him. The cameras zoomed in on the tears streaming down his face. It wasn't just grief, it was recognition, a realization, because he knew what the rest of the world didn't. The final line in the letter, meant only for the College of Cardinals, written in trembling Latin, read, "If he is willing, let Luis guide them, for in him I have seen the heart of Christ." The room erupted. Murmurs, prayers, stunned silence. Luis Tagle fell to his knees. He had never aspired to power, only to serve. His ministry had always been among the slums of Manila, the refugees of Syria, the voiceless. And now, the weight of 1.3 billion souls threatened to crush him. Was this divine calling, or unbearable burden? Behind closed doors, Tagle spent the next days in seclusion. Rumors swirled. Would he accept? Would the conclave choose him? But something deeper stirred within him. Memories of Pope Francis, their private conversations about humility, mystery, and the cost of true discipleship. On the eve of the conclave, a mysterious moment occurred. A Vatican guard reported seeing a figure in white walking silently through the gardens. Security rushed to investigate, but found no one. Later, Tagle confessed privately to a small group of cardinals that he had dreamt of Pope Francis that night, sitting in the dark chapel, smiling gently, saying only, "Don't be afraid of the dark, Luis. That's where the light shines brightest." When the white smoke rose days later, many expected a surprise. But as Cardinal Jean-Marc Pelletier stepped out onto the balcony, he declared not a name, but a mission. The next shepherd has not yet been chosen. For now, we honor the wish of Pope Francis to return to the peripheries. We will spend 40 days in prayer and service before voting again. This time, not from the palaces, but from the people. It was unprecedented, shocking, and yet deeply spiritual. Tagle remained silent through it all, not campaigning, not resisting, just serving, in soup kitchens, in refugee camps, in forgotten chapels. Cameras followed him, yes, but he never spoke of power, only of love. A month later, when the conclave reconvened, This time in a modest monastery outside Assisi, the vote was unanimous. Tagle became the new pope, but refused to take a regal name. He chose simply Pope Servus, the servant. In his first homily, he said, "Francis taught us that the church must bleed with the wounds of the world." His final wish was not about succession, it was about transformation. And we must carry that cross with joy. What began as a letter became a movement. What began in silence became a roar of compassion. Pope Francis's final wish was not a command, it was an invitation, one that called the church to its knees, and then back to its feet. And as for Tagle, he didn't just inherit a title, he became the echo of a whisper, the answer to a prayer, and a living reminder that sometimes the greatest power lies in surrender. The church was never meant to be a throne, he would later say. It was always meant to be a table. And at that table, finally, there was room for all. The church was never meant to be a throne. It was always meant to be a table. Those words, spoken by the newly elected Pope Servus, Luis Tagle, echoed through the world like a tremor of hope. But behind the peace in his voice, something more profound stirred. Because what the public didn't know was that Pope Francis had left behind one more secret. 3 days after the conclave ended, Sister Helena Maria returned to the Apostolic Library with a worn leather satchel clutched to her chest. Inside was a small, hand-stitched journal wrapped in linen cloth. Its pages were yellowed and fragrant with old incense. It wasn't found among the Vatican archives. It was found hidden beneath the floorboards of Pope Francis's personal chapel. Only 4 people were permitted to read it: Tagle, Cardinal Pelletier, Sister Helena, and a young seminary student named Elias. Elias was unknown to most. A theology scholar from Ghana with a limp from childhood polio, he had once sent Pope Francis a letter about faith in suffering. To his shock, the Pope had not only written back, but invited him to Rome secretly 2 years prior. The journal was inscribed, "To those who will carry the flame when I am gone, this is not my wish. This is the message entrusted to me by a voice greater than mine." As the 4 read through the journal by candlelight, they encountered a vision Pope Francis claimed to have received repeatedly in his final months. He described it as a dream, but more vivid than life. "I saw red threads running across the globe, linking hearts, churches, and people of every nation. But many threads were frayed, others were severed. A voice whispered to me, 'Reweave what has been torn.'" Francis believed it was not simply a poetic image, it was a divine mandate. He had started mapping these threads, visiting obscure churches, connecting hidden communities, writing letters to underground priests and women religious in countries where Christianity was forbidden. And in the journal was a final map. One that led not to Rome, but to a forgotten cave in the mountains of Turkey. Despite protests from Vatican security, Pope Servus insisted on going. In disguise, accompanied only by Elias, Sister Helena, and a small film crew sworn to secrecy, he embarked on a silent pilgrimage. They followed the markings in the journal, ancient Christian symbols, faded from time, hidden in mosaics and etched into stone doorways. They arrived at the cave on the eve of Pentecost. Inside, they found nothing at first. Then Elias noticed a strange indentation on the floor, like the groove of a kneeling man. Beside it, embedded in the wall, was a stone tablet, covered in dust, but unmistakable. The Lord's Prayer, written in Aramaic, and beneath it, carved in trembling script, "Blessed are the bridge builders, for they shall inherit not kingdoms, but hearts." As they turned to leave, the cave trembled. An earthquake tremor struck. A boulder collapsed, pinning Pope Servus's leg beneath it. Elias and Sister Helena tried desperately to move it, but the Pope stopped them. "No, this is meant." And then, in that dark cave, bleeding and in pain, Tagle began to pray aloud, not for rescue, but for reconciliation between divided peoples, broken families, estranged nations. Let this wound be the bridge, Lord. Let it speak louder than any sermon I could ever preach. Miraculously, the tremor subsided, and they escaped. But when the footage of the pilgrimage was quietly released weeks later, it ignited a global movement. People from war-torn lands began writing in, saying they too had seen the red threads in dreams. Thousands shared visions, stories, and art, all reflecting a call to unity, healing, and divine connection. Soon, an underground network of thread keepers emerged, ordinary people pledging to become healers in their communities. Muslims, Christians, Jews, Buddhists, even atheists joined. It wasn't a movement of doctrine, it was a movement of presence. But the story wasn't over. Just before the Feast of Assumption, Elias returned to the cave alone. There, in the silence, he found something embedded beneath the spot where Pope Servus had been trapped. A scroll, sealed in wax, older than the church itself, inscribed on the outside in Aramaic, for the one who carries the flame in the age of silence. Its contents have not yet been revealed, but one thing is certain: Pope Francis knew it was there. The world now speaks not of a new papacy, but of a new way, not centralized authority, but sacred listening, not domination, but holy companionship. In a time of noise and division, the final wish of Pope Francis and the humble obedience of Luis Tagle reawakened something ancient, something mystical, something divine. Because in the end, the church was never meant to be made of marble. It was always meant to be made of hearts set on fire. The scroll Elias discovered beneath the cave was taken directly to the Vatican archives, locked behind doors that hadn't been opened since the Second Council of Nicaea. It was examined by scholars, linguists, mystics. The wax seal bore the ancient sigil of the Desposini, descendants of Jesus' family, long thought a legend. The scroll's language was neither Hebrew nor Greek, but an ancient fusion, perhaps a tongue lost before Babel. And it began with one chilling line: "When the shepherd falls beneath stone, the fire shall rise in flesh." Cardinal Pelletier, now prefect of the doctrine of the faith, turned to Elias and whispered, he wasn't pinned by accident, he was chosen. Meanwhile, around the world, strange phenomena began to ripple outward. In a Siberian village, a blind child claimed to see a man in white in her dreams, saying, "He brings threads of fire." A warlord in Africa laid down his weapons after dreaming of a burning table in the desert, surrounded by the poor. A nun in Argentina reported stigmata, not on her hands, but her heart. She wept tears of wine for 7 days. Whispers began across the church. The age of prophecy had returned, but with it came opposition. A secret cabal of ultra-conservative cardinals, calling themselves the Pillars, plotted to suppress the scroll. They feared it threatened the very structure of the church, and they were willing to act. On the eve of a massive global convocation called the Council of the Flame, millions gathered in Rome and around the world. Pope Servus was set to unveil the scroll's final translation and his vision for a reformed, decentralized, servant-led church. But hours before the ceremony, he disappeared. No alarm, no sign of struggle. Only a broken chain, his papal cross, left on the chapel floor. The world froze. News networks speculated. Social media burned with conspiracy theories. Some said he fled. Others whispered of martyrdom. But Elias, he knew where to go. Guided by a vision and the remaining markings in the journal of Pope Francis, Elias traveled to Mount Sinai. Not the tourist trail, but a hidden path known only to Bedouin mystics. There, in a fissure between two burning rocks, he found him, Pope Servus, barefoot, fasting, and surrounded by fireflies. "I wasn't taken," he said quietly. "I was summoned." He handed Elias a new letter. "It is time for me to decrease, so the flame may increase." On the day of Pentecost, with the whole world watching via live stream, Elias climbed the steps of the Vatican alone, holding the say, ancient scroll and Pope Servis's letter. He read aloud, "The church must now go where I cannot lead it. Let no man wear a crown forged in gold. Let the shepherds walk barefoot. Let the altars be built in prisons, deserts, kitchens. The flame is no longer held by one, but by all who love without condition." And then the sky broke open, not with rain, but with light. From every corner of the earth, people looked upward and saw the same thing, a pillar of fire spiraling skyward, seen differently in every place. In Jerusalem, it looked like a dove. In Rwanda, like a weeping tree. In Ireland, like a burning harp. In the Vatican, it hovered above the obelisk as a spinning, spiraling red thread. And from within it, a voice, not male or female, not old or young, echoed across the world. "You are my body now. Carry me into the shadows. The throne is broken, but the table is set." Pope Servis was never seen again. Some say he vanished into the desert, like Elijah. Others believe he walks the earth in disguise, serving soup in war zones, listening at hospital beds, hiding in the margins. Elias never took a title. He became a pilgrim, carrying the scroll across nations, lighting flame communities. Wherever he went, churches without walls, led by women, migrants, the wounded, the forgiven. The Vatican remains, but it is now just one table among thousands. No crowns, no thrones, only open hands and broken bread. In stained glass windows around the world, the story is now told, not of a pope who ruled, but of one who vanished into flame. Below his image, engraved into stone, are the final words he ever spoke to Elias. "Don't build monuments to me, build altars in the rubble. That's where I will be." And beneath that, the words of Pope Francis, whose final wish still burns. "Let the church bleed with the wounds of the world, and it will become the heart of Christ." Again, the end, or perhaps the beginning.